It's 2010 and you're living in Los Angeles. The news is reporting weird events happening across your city. Your neighbors are acting strange and the hospitals are all overwhelmed. But the roads are still clear. That specific window is one of the most important moments in your entire survival timeline. But most people will sleep right through it. Now before we go any further, we need to address the elephant in the room. Fear the Walking Dead didn't exactly live up to expectations overall. But Season 1 did one thing extremely well. It gave us one of the most realistic depictions of an urban collapse ever put on screen. And if you're anything like me and enjoy the early stages of a zombie outbreak, then you probably enjoyed Season 1 of Fear the Walking Dead to a certain degree. So today we're going to break it down the same way we always do. As you or me, a regular person living in Los Angeles, when the world starts to come apart, we're going to take a look at what you'd see, when you need to leave, and what happens if you don't. That being said, if you've never watched Fear the Walking Dead, don't worry about it. I'm going to walk you through everything. And if you have watched it, you're about to see it in a completely different light. Alright, so before we talk about what went wrong, we need to understand what LA actually is, because the geography and the infrastructure are the real story here. The wildfire virus was just a catalyst. If you live in LA, your water doesn't come from LA. The city sits in a semi-arid basin that can't sustain its own population. Your drinking water travels through aqueducts from the Owens Valley and the Colorado River, some of it covering 200 miles of pipeline and pumping stations before it ever reaches you. The entire system requires constant electrical power, staffed facilities, and maintenance crews around the clock. The moment the people maintaining it disappear, 13 million people are now sitting in a desert with nothing to drink. By the time the walkers are openly appearing across the city, the systems keeping LA alive would already be buckling. The power grid is another issue. It's already under stress every summer. Rolling blackouts have happened here multiple times. Layer a major emergency on top of that, and the grid doesn't need zombies for it to fail. It just needs a bad enough day. But once a few thousand zombies do start stumbling through the substations, you'll start to see how fast the lights actually go out. And the thing that really defines LA is the freeways. The average person that lives here drives over 40 miles a day, and there's no real mass transit alternative for most people. When something goes wrong here, your instinct, which is the instinct LA trained into you since you got your license, is to get in your car and drive somewhere else. Unfortunately, that instinct is going to get a lot of people killed, because when everyone in LA decides to get in their cars right around the same time, the freeway won't just slow down, it'll completely stop. And a stopped freeway full of idling cars is a dinner bell for every walker within earshot. Freeways only work when the traffic is moving. The second the flow stops, the whole thing changes. One crash or one block lane can turn thousands of vehicles into a stationary line with very few ways off. And once that happens, you are no longer using the freeway to escape. You're trapped on it, boxed in by concrete, surrounded by strangers, burning fuel, making noise, and waiting in exactly the kind of place you do not want to be once walkers start showing up. And we've seen similar stuff like this play out in real life. During the campfire of 2018, which was the deadliest and most destructive wildfire in California history, the town of Paradise, which had a population of 20,000 people, only had one major road out. The evacuation turned into a death trap while embers rained down, and people died in their cars while others abandoned their vehicles and ran on foot. Now scale that to 13 million people and replace fire with zombies. So here's the full picture of what we're dealing with. A city where the water is imported, the power is strained, and the entire transportation network becomes a death trap the moment everyone decides to hightail it out of there. That's what you're dealing with. Alright, so let's break down the timeline. The collapse plays out across a 2-week period, from late August to early September 2010. And unlike most zombie media that drops you into the chaos or skips the juicy stuff, Season 1 of Fear the Walking Dead takes you through every phase of the initial outbreak. So as we go through this, put yourself in the city. Don't just watch it on screen, but actually imagine living through it. Alright, so the show starts off with a drug addict named Nick Clark, who wakes up in an abandoned church and finds his girlfriend eating a corpse. He ends up in a hospital trying to tell anybody who'll listen to him what happened. But nobody believes him because he's a heroin addict who was high when it happened. Even his own mother writes it off, and the cops don't bother to investigate. And why would they? It's a drug den in downtown LA. Bad things happen there all the time. Elsewhere, a high school kid named Tobias has been tracking strange reports online. He brings a knife to school and warns his guidance counselor that something much bigger is coming. She confiscates the knife and sends him to class. A teenager had better situational awareness than every adult around him, and the system dismissed him because he was a kid saying scary things. If you're a regular person living in LA during the first 72 hours, you're seeing almost nothing. Maybe a strange viral video of a man attacking an EMT on a freeway off-ramp, maybe a few extra missing persons reports, maybe you work in a hospital and the ER intake feels heavier than usual that week, or you're a cop and the dispatch calls are getting weird. Hell, it's even possible something similar to the Miami cannibal attack happens again. But for most people, that's just LA being LA. Weird things happen there all of the time, and your brain is built to filter it out because if you reacted to every strange thing in a city with 13 million people, you'd never leave your apartment. This pattern shows up in almost every major disaster. In the early days of COVID, reports were coming out of Wuhan in January 2020, and the rest of the world went about its business for a few weeks. You didn't exactly need security clearance to see what was coming. You needed to take scattered data points seriously before they became a trend, and most people wait until that trend is undeniable. Right now in LA, the freeways are open, the gas stations are stocked, and the roads in the city are clear. If you get in your car and drive east, you survive the outbreak in the city. The problem is, you very likely won't leave, because nothing has happened to you yet, and most people aren't actively looking for signs of something being off at this moment in time. A few days later, a police officer shoots a homeless man downtown, and cell phone footage starts going viral. What the video shows is a cop killing someone who appears to be mentally ill. What actually happened is the man was already turned, and the officer put him down. But nobody knows that, so they see what LA's taught them to see. Another incident of police brutality in a city with a long documented history of exactly that. The key point is that the outbreak doesn't arrive in a vacuum. It lands in a city that already has a history of civil unrest, police brutality, and public distrust during a fast-moving crisis. So when footage of a police shooting starts spreading, the people don't assume they are watching the beginning of a zombie outbreak. They assume they're looking at another volatile night in Los Angeles. It's misreads like this that buy the outbreak more time to get its hooks in deeper. The confusion gives the outbreak room to spread. Reports stay fragmented, people keep misreading what they're already seeing, and each bad incident gets folded into the general noise of a city under stress. By the time it's obvious, the infection has already taken a foothold. So if you're a regular person living in LA, here's what your night might look like. The power goes out in rolling blackouts across the metro, and your TV cuts to static mid-broadcast. You look out the window and the streetlights are dark, but what grabs your attention is the glow of fires toward downtown, and the sirens, way beyond the occasional ambulance you're used to seeing. Just a steady overlapping wall of them that doesn't stop. Your phone starts blowing up with texts from a friend asking if you're okay and a call from your mom. Social media is a mess of shaky footage and contradicting reports. Some people say it's riots, some say it's a virus, and some say it's the police shooting unarmed civilians. But nobody agrees because nobody actually knows what the hell is going on. Everything you're seeing, the riots, the blackouts, the sirens, your brain has a template for it because LA has had riots before. It's had rolling blackouts. Every experience in your life tells you this will burn itself out in a few days. The National Guard will restore order, and life will go back to normal. Historically, that's been true. Disruptions usually get resolved, but not this time. This time the disruption is biological, exponential, and doesn't burn out. In fact, this virus burns you out with a fever, and after that it reanimates your corpse. Later in the week, the National Guard rolls in. Fences go up, soldiers patrol the perimeters, curfews are enforced, and rations are distributed. The official word is everything within a 12-mile radius has been cleared and the situation is under control. And for the first time in days, you exhale. A soldier hands you a bottle of water, and you actually sleep through the night. But little do you know, this is the most dangerous moment in the entire collapse, and the infected aren't what make it dangerous. The safe zone feels like you've been rescued, but it's there to contain you. The fences that look like protection are actually penning you in, and whether you figure that out in time is the difference between living and dying. 9 days have now passed inside the safe zone. 9 days where residents settle into a strange compressed version of normal life. And the character Travis becomes the civilian point of contact with the military, which gives the neighborhood the feeling that there's still some line of communication left between the people inside the zone and the people running it. Until a man named Doug Thompson breaks down and disappears. The military claims they found him near the perimeter and took him into custody, and most people accept that explanation, because the other possibility is far worse. But the cracks are everywhere if you're willing to look. Madison sneaks past the perimeter one night and finds bodies, not infected, just people, shot and left by the military. And this is why across this series, I will always advise you not to blindly approach the military, because at the end of the day, you do not know what their intentions are. Not right away at least. Anyway, Chris sees a light signaling from a window beyond the fence. Someone's still alive out there, and then he watches gunfire silence it. The gap between what the authorities are telling you and what you can see with your own two eyes is widening every day. And behind closed doors, the military has an operation called Cobalt, part of the Sunset Protocol, which means this safe zone was never built to save you. It was built to hold you in place until the military pulled out and the city was sanitized. Everyone left behind is a liability. The fences you trusted are about to be unmanned, and you've spent 9 days doing nothing because you believe someone was handling the situation for you. Alright, so by day 16 of the TV show, one man figures out what Operation Cobalt is before it drops. Daniel Salazar, a barber from El Salvador, opens the gates of a nearby arena where the military has been holding thousands of walkers. He floods the horde towards the compound, and in the chaos, the families fight their way out with the help of Victor Strand and his yacht. The military ends up firebombing LA, wave after wave of incendiary strikes, neighborhood by neighborhood. The survivors watch from Strand's yacht as the coast glows orange. So if you're still in the city, in a safe zone waiting for rescue, maybe stuck on the highway somewhere, or in your home or an apartment building hoping the bombs stop, well, you're basically dead. Alright, now that we've gone over the timeline, let's figure out when you actually had a chance to leave. So window 1. If you've watched my previous episodes, you'd know by now that I like to call this the invisible window. The one that barely anyone will notice. If you've seen Fear the Walking Dead, you've already watched someone live through this window in real time. And we briefly talked about it at the beginning of this video. And that someone is Tobias, the kid at the school, who was warning adults, taking a knife to school, tracking patterns and connecting dots while everyone around him was still sitting in class. So what does this window look like for you? It would start with you hearing reports about a virus spreading in 5 states, strange clips showing up online of people attacking each other, and ideally instead of brushing it off, you're actually connecting the dots and acting on it before anyone around you takes it seriously. So while everyone else is still going to work and scrolling past the headlines, you pack your car, pick a direction away from the city, and start driving without encountering any resistance. Just normal traffic, working gas stations, and unlooted grocery stores. Absolutely nothing out of the norm. If you manage to leave during this window, your survival odds are genuinely good. But the cost is everything you leave behind, and everyone thinking you've lost your mind. If it blows over, you look like a lunatic. And statistically speaking, things usually do blow over. Which is the issue, because survival has never been about the odds. It's about the one time the odds are wrong. Unfortunately, a small amount of people will act on this window. Alright, window 2, the something's wrong window. This is the most practical window for most people. The one where a regular person with no special information can look around and recognize that something isn't quite right. At this point, here is some of what you're seeing. The riot downtown is all over the news. Power's cutting in and out across the metro. You drive past a hospital, and the parking lot is overflowing. Cars are double parked, and people are outside of the ER sitting on curbs. Your grocery stores will also have gaps in their shelves that weren't there a few days ago. And the bottled water section is cleared out completely. And more than likely the toilet paper. We all know about the great toilet paper apocalypse. Toilet paper always goes. At this point, you just need to recognize what's slowly happening around you. Those are system stress indicators, and they mean the infrastructure you depend on is approaching the limit of what it can handle. If you pack a bag right now and get on the freeway, it might be the worst traffic you've ever seen in your life, and watching your gas gauge might make you a little bit nervous, but the roads will be moving, albeit slowly, but moving. And you get out. Maybe you lose your house or your apartment, perhaps even your job and all your belongings, but you survive much longer than the people who stayed behind. And now you hit the false window, the stage that feels like you're being rescued. The military is here, the power is back on inside the zone, water's being handed out, and somebody with a uniform is telling you the situation is stabilizing. So the first time in days you start to feel safe. And that is exactly why this window is so dangerous. It feels like something is finally being done. But you're no longer ahead of the collapse. You're inside a fenced neighborhood with soldiers on the perimeter, a curfew that gets enforced, and no real freedom to make your own decisions. If you try to leave, you get turned back. If you push, you get detained. The system keeping you calm is the same system keeping you stuck in place. By this point, the question is no longer whether the city is failing. The question is whether you realize the safe zone is holding you in a pen before the people running it abandon you. Unfortunately, most people won't realize it. They'll keep trusting the fence, the bottled water, and the chain of command, right up until Operation Cobalt makes it clear what the zone is actually meant for. So if you made it all the way to this window, your odds are terrible. And now we make it to window 4, the firebomb window. At this point, you're basically screwed. There's no way around it. Infrastructure has collapsed, stores have been looted, and there's no authority left. The city is crawling with zombies, and the freeways are clogged up with abandoned vehicles. Your only plays now are to move towards the desert or by water. In the TV show, Strand's yacht is the single best survival asset in the story because the ocean doesn't require maintenance, it doesn't need a power grid, and it doesn't gridlock. But having access to a rich dude's boat is pure luck, not a strategy. Now let's touch on some of the places people are most likely to end up in, move through, or rely on once the city starts breaking down, and we'll quickly run through why most of them are bad ideas. First up, we have the hospital. This is where the sick converge, which makes it ground zero during an outbreak. Zombies or not. We see this in the TV show when Travis drives by the hospital. It's basically a war zone, and it would be an absolute bloodbath during a zombie outbreak in real life. And then there's your own home. In most outbreaks, your home is usually a pretty solid first move. It gives you immediate access to your supplies, a structure you already know, and a neighborhood you're already familiar with. Early on, that's a massive advantage. During this phase, the worst thing you can do is throw yourself into the same panic and chaos as everybody else. Unfortunately, in The Walking Dead, LA doesn't just collapse, it gets bombed. So staying home buys you time early on, but only if you understand that a home is a buffer, not a forever plan. Next we have downtown. A lot of people are going to be moving through there and trying to escape. The reason this place sucks is because it's dense, noisy, and full of bottlenecks, and one of the first places where unrest, emergency response, and infected movement start flooding the streets. If you're already there when shit hit the fan, getting out is going to be a problem. And then we have the freeways. I know I've already talked about this a lot, but they're the best option early on like I've mentioned, but also your worst option later on if you didn't move right away. Treat them like a perishable resource. Once they expire, a gridlocked freeway is a buffet line with guardrails. And since we're in LA, the desert is another place people will likely end up in. In the show, Tobias actually explains that the desert offers better odds, because the urban areas like Los Angeles will fall into chaos quickly, with no satellites, internet, cell service, or power grids holding things together. And he's right, it's better than the city. But the desert will kill you just as easily as the city if you reach it without food, water, fuel, shelter, and somewhere specific to go. And last but not least, we have the ocean. The ultimate infrastructure independent exit. The ocean will never gridlock on you. Unless you get stuck in a harbor, I guess, then I guess you could say the ocean's gridlocked. But getting to the marina during an urban collapse and having somebody with a boat let you on is wishful thinking. But if you are near the coast and know someone with a boat, nothing else comes close to this. And for a lot of people, Catalina Island is probably the destination sitting in the back of your mind, because it's close enough to feel possible and far enough away from the dead to matter. Now, before we move forward, I want to touch on some of the things the show got right, because the spin-off caught a lot of criticism for being slow and light on zombie action, which is fair, but the show's breakdown of collapsing information, public trust in authority, and family-driven survival choices is genuinely well done. The outbreak hiding behind pre-existing social frameworks is uncomfortably realistic. In a city large and chaotic like LA, there are thousands of pre-existing narratives for things to hide behind, from drug addicts seeing things to police brutality to mental illness and riots. The show understands that in a slow onset crisis, accurate information dies before the people do. And the institutional response, like the military arriving, people settling into the safe zones, that's textbook disaster psychology. People adjust to the new normal and stop questioning the people in charge, because questioning them means accepting that nobody's actually in charge anymore. And at the end of the day, LA had some important messages for us. First, timing beats certainty. The information usually shows up before the public accepts what it means. For example, day 1 looks weird, day 3 looks worrying, day 5 looks undeniable. By the time it feels undeniable, your best options are already behind you. Second, infrastructure decides how long a city can keep functioning. LA only works while the water is being pumped in, while trucks are still restocking stores, while the power stays on, and while the freeway keeps moving. Once those systems are failing, the whole system comes crashing down on your head. And third, official control can buy calm without buying safety. Fear the Walking Dead gets this part right. Uniforms, fences, bottled water, and curfews make people feel like somebody's in charge. Sometimes that helps, but other times, it just keeps people still long enough for the real exit to close. Alright, so can a regular person survive the fall of Los Angeles in Fear the Walking Dead? Technically yes, but only if they leave early enough to avoid the city's main trap, which is the belief that one more day of waiting will make the picture clearer. In a city like LA, that instinct will get people killed, because the roads look usable until everyone needs them. The authorities look reassuring until the priorities shift. Home feels safe until bombs start dropping on your head. So if you're gonna make it out of here as a normal person, you needed to leave before absolute certainty showed up, not when the whole city all clued in right around the same time, not when the government made it official, and definitely not when the rescue operation was already underway. You needed to move while the picture still felt incomplete, and before Los Angeles turned all of its scale, traffic, and dependence on fragile systems against you. Because in the end, this is what kills most people here, not just the walkers. Delay, misread information, false safety, and a city that only works while everything else is still working around it. Alright guys, if you made it to the end, I appreciate that as always, and if you like this series, I have a whole playlist of a lot more just like it, or YouTube thinks you'll like this video.